All right, let's get started for the monthly market report. It's the month of February, and we're doing this monthly market report, and we're going to cover several things that I think are very, very important in the market right now. We're seeing a lot of movement. Sometimes movement in things that in a normal market might take 3 to 6 months that are happening inside of 24 or 48 or 72 hours, maybe even a week. Very, very fast moving. So we're going to break those down. We're going to talk about three things today. We're going to cover interest rates, and there's a lot of movement there, but give you some of the highlights there. Then move into inventory, one of the most significant issues in real estate today. And then Kate's going to come on and talk about some of the headlines that we're seeing right now that may be factually correct, but mislead consumers in a lot of ways, so that we can be the expert. As always, I want to say thank you to everybody that joins the monthly market report and puts in the time, energy, and preparation to be the expert. I think the difference maker today in our market is the agent that is the expert, the confident agent that is educated, that's able to guide their clients forward successfully is winning today, and there is opportunity. So with that as sort of a backdrop, let's go ahead and get started. Here's where I would anchor our time. If I had to kind of anchor our time over the next few minutes, it would be this. People do not follow the best leaders. They follow the ones they can understand the easiest. And I think we live in a day and time where there's more, information, there's more data, there's more research available to all of us than there has been ever before, really in the history of mankind. And yet people are confused. So our job really is not to overload people with all the information. Our job is to be able to be easily understood. And that's my hope over the next few minutes, is that I can present this information, that Kate can present this information where it's easy to understand. Because no matter where you turn on the news or even in our business, so many people talking about what's happening, and yet people look at it and they go, okay, I'm confused. I'm not exactly sure what's happening. And I want to break that down for you. And here's where I would start. Mortgage rates are trending downward. We can say that confidently. As I'm recording this, rates ended at just over 6%, 6.09 at the end of last week, and we've seen them trickle up a little bit to 6.2 or 3, but no doubt we're in this downward trending environment where the average mortgage rate peaked around the first half of November. And so for the last 90 days, we've seen almost this full percentage point drop in price. And so depending on who you're working with, depending on the area that you're in and the price points that you're working with, I would effectively communicate this message. And I think as we see more good information come about inflation, as we go throughout the year, we're going to see this downward trend happen. And I'm gonna sort of break some of that down and what we can expect around the corner as we stay in this downward trending environment. But I think we can say this confidently, that the peak in rates appears to be behind us. In sometime around the late fall, October, November timeframes when rates peaked. And let's hope that continues on. I saw this quote. It reminded me of, I think, a great word picture. It says this, came from Ali Wolf from Zonda. She said, I wonder if some consumers have worked through the 5 stages of grief of higher mortgage rates. Certainly last year, we know as rates started to rise, it slammed the brakes on a lot of our business. And I'm not convinced that maybe the actual interest rate did that, as it was the rapid rise in rate and the rapid rise in price. But now we're here, the beginning second month here in February of 2023. And consumers are like, okay, we're starting to understand this. We're starting to get this. See a little bit of relief in rates, and we'll start to see more demand. And in many markets, I'm sure where you're at there, depending on the market that you're at on Long Island, you're seeing more demand as well. If something's priced right in this market, it's going to sell quickly. And even, a lot of stories of multiple offers coming back. Now, I don't think we're heading back into the market of COVID where there was this frenzy and there was all of this going on. That was, this challenge that we saw in real estate and prices rising so quickly. but I do think consumers are adjusting to the fact that interest rates it's going to cost more to buy a home. If we think about this and we start to break it down, this graphic here probably does the best job of that. We think about rates and we think about the 30-year fixed rate, 7 to 7.5 is going to bring weak buyer demand. And we certainly saw that over the summer. 6.5 to 7, limited buyer demand. Okay, 6 to 6.5, we're getting into good buyer demand. We break through the threshold to get into the high fives, and we'll see strong buyer demand come back into the market. Now, if you were to kind of take this and I were to draw a word picture, the KCM research team does such a good job with developing these graphics. And if I were to graph for you over this, where we've been throughout the month of January, first part of February, it's right here. And we've seen good buyer demand start to come back in the market. You turn on the news and it's like new year. Hey, some things are happening differently in real estate that we didn't see towards the end of the year. So be on the lookout for that. Really, if I was a leader today, I would have this picture right here plastered in my office. I would have it up in maybe areas where everybody could see it, print off multiple copies, and maybe have it for individuals and remind people that we're heading back into a time between good and strong buyer demand based on where interest rates are trending. If we go back and graph that, we see that we're already there. And as we get more good information about the economy, about inflation, we should expect that trend to continue. The biggest issue, though, that I believe we face going into the spring market is not this interest rate issue, because that's going to quickly become a non-issue, I believe. It's this issue. It's the fact that new listings are now below previous years. And I want to break this down for just a minute and spend a moment on it, because as you see this red line here, that's new listings coming to market in 2022. And so we started out the year, new listings coming and starting to almost eclipse where we had been in previous years. And, sort of the case that many people made that were calling for a crash is that listings are going to continue to climb as the market slows. And so price is always determined by supply and demand. As listings climb and less people want to buy, the market's going to crash. And that was essentially the case that people made for why real estate, they thought real estate would crash. We know they were wrong, but that was their case. In actuality, here's what happened. New listings started to fall, and we brought new listings to market at a slower rate than the past, 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021. And we know that's what's kept upward pressure on prices. There's not a market across this country, and you're no different, that says we have plenty of listings. We have plenty of homes for the number of people that want to buy them. No doubt the number and the transaction volume has slowed, but listings is the issue as we go into the spring market that we need more of. And certainly builders, by and large, are not building. They've pulled back a little bit. And we wrapped up December with 21% fewer new listings coming to market in this country than the prior year. So no doubt we're not seeing the listings that we need. Matter of fact, if we look at this, a more recent number, and you look at January and where we finished up new listings in this country, we're at a lower level than we saw certainly in 2020 and 2021, but those were depleted years where we know we struggle with inventory. But even pre-pandemic, inventory has risen in this country, but we're not bringing the listings to market that we need. Now there are several reasons for that. Those that have maybe an interest rate that they say, we're going to stay where we're at. And certainly those that say, we don't want to put on our house on the market because we're not sure where we are going to go, which is another inventory issue that we face. But no doubt, as we start to look at this, we need more listings, and it's on us. It's our job to go out and generate new listings. We've talked about how to do that from expired listings, maybe a conversation that needs to adjust with a seller. We've talked about that in reaching out to people to say, hey, there's more equity in homes today than ever before. What are you going to do with your equity? Articles come out and talk about people that maybe bought during the pandemic that have buyer's remorse. Now, I'm going to say, I don't believe that that's a significant issue in the market. I think anybody that buys a home at any time, a year later or 6 months later, they'd say we would do something different. We would have done, we wish we had a bigger closet, or the kitchen was arranged this way, or whatever the case may be. But it's a great place to reach out and say, hey, you bought a house in the last couple of years or whenever. How's that working out? And just to start that conversation, be proactive, go out and generate those listings. Because what you're hearing is this. This comes from Mike Simonson from Altos. He says, I'm looking at the latest housing data, and I see surprising demand indicators, including home price resiliency and supply staying restricted. What we just talked about, restricted inventory. Who would have guessed that? Well, I think a lot of us in the business would have guessed that. We would have said, you know what, if you look at what's happening, the dynamics in the market, we're not seeing a flood of inventory. We're not seeing a flood of foreclosures. And yes, that is keeping upward pressure on prices, home price resiliency, he's calling it here. And there are demand indicators as we start to move into that, if you think about that red to green image that I showed you, we're moving back into good to strong indicators relative to the health of the market and going into the spring market. The only question will be the health in the sort of the spring market will be determined by the number of homes that we have to sell. We can't sell what we don't have. But here's what becomes very, very clear. And I want to spend just a minute on this. We are no doubt in the turn of the real estate market. I've talked extensively about this, about just the race car driver and how their reputation, their career, their money is earned in the turn. They come into a turn and they know how to navigate it. And let's face it, the skill of a race car driver is not about the straightaway. Any of us could get on a straightaway. We could drive a race car, but when we came to the turn, we'd crash and that would be the end of us. But the skill is navigating the turn. And I wouldn't want you to miss this right now. We are inside the turn in real estate. Most experts would say it started about the middle of last year. It'll run to the middle of this year. We're here in February, maybe right through the middle of the turn. The best leaders are gathering their team and they're saying, okay, here's what our plan is. We're going to go after expired listings. We're going to have conversations about, equity in people's homes. We're going to have conversations with everybody that bought a home in the last 2 years. And they are building their plan to accelerate through the turn, while some agents are sitting back saying, I'm not sure what's going to happen. There's a very, very big difference right now between the educated, confident agent and the agent that says, I'm not sure what's happening. The educated, confident agent is guiding their clients through this turn. The agent that's confused maybe is saying, I'm not sure what's going to happen. And our job is to be able to use this information and drive our business forward, give the best advice we can to those that we're working with. Maybe not to convince them to do something that they don't want to do, but to have a conversation that says, could I share with you a few things that I'm seeing in the market that may help you make an educated decision? Because a lot of people say, maybe something bad's coming this year in real estate. And if you turn on the news, you certainly hear that a lot of times. But here's a very interesting thing. I'm going to give you a couple more slides before Kate comes up. Big banks are starting to revise their forecast. This is a look from Goldman Sachs. January 10th, they said, we believe real estate in this country is going to lose a little over 6% in value, 6.1% in depreciation in the coming year. Well, on the 24th of January, they went back quickly and they updated that to negative 2.6%. If you followed KCM, we've said, this year is likely flat, a little bit of depreciation, a little bit of appreciation, depending on where it lands, a flat year in real estate, because we don't have an enormous amount of supply that's driving price down. Price is always determined by supply and demand. And oh, by the way, you're starting to see banks and forecasters start to say that. Be on the lookout for that, saying, many of them said last year it's going to be disastrous, and they're saying now, maybe it's not going to be that bad. Maybe we were wrong about our earlier forecast. Be on the lookout for that because you'll start to see it. The question I'd like to put on the table is, have home values hit bottom? If you look at this from every major tracker that we look at, Case-Shiller, FHFA, Black Knight, CoreLogic, you see right here that the peak in depreciation happened sometime around August, sometime in the fall. Now, these numbers are cumulative, but we've seen less depreciation than we saw back in August. Now, our job right now is to be the expert, is to go out and give a good analysis of the market that we serve. But as you look nationally at home prices, what I can tell you confidently is they're not in a free fall. That is absolutely true. But sometimes when people turn on the news, when people try to educate themselves, they hear things that lead them to believe that. So I'm going to invite Kate Rezebek in to talk about the fact that headlines do more to terrify than they do to clarify.
Thank you so much, David. This topic comes up quite a lot. Headlines do more to terrify than clarify. And anytime we see something in the media that could be confusing or hard to understand, we want to make sure that we're bringing you the education you need to help your clients understand what's really happening out there, because a lot of the media headlines can make people pause their plans. So I'm going to start with this stat right here from a recent survey from NerdWallet. And it says 67% of Americans say a housing market crash is imminent in the next 3 years. 67%. That is 2 out of every 3 people think that a housing market crash is coming. Now, if you follow along with us, you know that the data says differently, but why do people think that? It's because there's so much confusion out there around us. And a lot of it stems from headlines like these. So we pulled these headlines about foreclosure data recently, and it says U.S. foreclosure filings surged 115% in 2022. U.S. foreclosure activity doubles annually, but still below pre-pandemic levels. And the foreclosure filings rose 115% in the past year. Now, while all these are factually true, they don't tell the whole story, but they get people to read the articles and read the information because these headlines are alarming. These headlines will make you think the market is about to crash. So what I want to do is take the recent foreclosure data that these are pointing to and break that down to make sure we're all on the same page to understand what these headlines truly mean. And then we'll talk about how to communicate this with your clients. So take a look here. This is a quote from Adam, a very trusted source that we follow. It says, Adam, a leading curator of real estate data nationwide for land and property data, today released its year-end 2022 U.S. foreclosure market report, which shows foreclosure filings, default notices, scheduled auctions, and bank repossessions were reported on 324,237 U.S. properties in 2022. That's up 115% from 2021. So that's what you saw in those headlines, but down 34% from 2019 before the pandemic shook up the market. That's what you didn't see in those headlines. So foreclosure filings in 2022 were also down 89% from a peak of nearly 2.9 million in 2010. So much packed in here. And what you can see is that a lot of the media headlines will go right to the statistic that grabs attention, up 115%. But there's so much more to the story. And that's what I want to share with you today. And I think this next graph that we have really shows this visually. So let's break it down. So here's a look at U.S. foreclosure activity. It says it doubles annually, but still below pre-pandemic levels. So this is a look at U.S. properties with foreclosure filings, and it's going all the way back to 2005. And what you can see in those dark red bars is those were years where we had over 1 million foreclosure filings per year in this country. Now, if you think about this and you look at the data of, how much foreclosures have increased over the past year, that's what the 115% was. But look over at the right-hand side. We went from nearly, record level lows of foreclosures in 2020 and 2021 to up in 2022. That's the 115% increase. They more than doubled, no doubt. We said this was coming, but at the same time, if you look back in time as to what this means contextually, 324,000 foreclosures is nowhere near the millions and millions that were recorded when the housing market crashed in this country. So we're in a very different period of time, a very different landscape for what's happening in the housing market. We're going to break down all of those reasons why we're in a different place today. But it's important to have the context as you look at the headlines to truly understand what they mean. Because in 2010, 2.9 million foreclosure filings, since then, we've had a much more qualified buyer. Far more people the people who are applying for mortgages now and able to get a mortgage have better credit history. They, have income qualifications, things that weren't in play that caused the market to crash. And so when you think about why people are concerned, 2 out of 3 people think that the housing market is going to crash. They look back in time and they remember what happened when the market crashed, and they see foreclosures rising and they think, here we go again. But the data looks very different. And so let's zoom in a little bit more at the past few years. So we actually had 1 million fewer foreclosures over the last 3 years than we did even compared to normal years. So let me show you what this means. So this is, again, a zoom in on that data from Adam. And if you look at 2017, 2018, and 2019, we averaged just under 600,000 foreclosure filings in this country. Now, we never want anyone to go through foreclosure by any means. But what we do know is that happens every year in this country. Unfortunate financial situations, family situations, things happen, and people have to go through the foreclosure process. Now, if you look at the last 3 years, we had a very different scenario. We had the forbearance program. We had higher equity so people could sell their homes to avoid foreclosure. Banks and lenders did everything they could to swear up and down that we were not going to end up in a foreclosure crisis again. And so over the past 3 years, we had record low foreclosures. So we're not even anywhere near even a normal year when it comes to foreclosure filings in this country. Now, our hearts go out to the 324,000 people who last year had to go through this process. But what we're not talking about here is epic proportions where we have a housing market crash. So people think crash when they hear foreclosures rising. But what the data shows contextually is that we're in a very different place today. So let's talk a little bit more about why. This is a quote from Rick Sharga, and it says, 18 months after the end of the government's foreclosure moratorium, and with less than 5% of the 8.4 million borrowers who entered the CARES Act forbearance program remaining, foreclosure activity remains significantly lower than it was prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. It seems clear that government and mortgage industry efforts during the pandemic, coupled with a strong economy, have helped prevent millions of unnecessary foreclosures. And that's the bottom line right there, is that, we're talking about a very different experience. The forbearance program gave people time and space when they needed it to get back on their feet. The mortgage industry is doing everything they can to work with homeowners to keep them in their homes. And we've had a strong economy. So the equity that people have built up over time has given them the opportunity to sell their home versus go through the foreclosure process. So while we know that foreclosures are rising today, we're certainly not talking about crash levels because we're in a very, very different scenario. And I think that this quote from Bill McBride says it very well. He's an expert that we follow too, and really kind of saw the writing on the wall when the market crashed, 2008, 2009. But here's what he's saying about today's market. This was in a quote from just last month in mid-January. It says, the bottom line is there will be an increase in foreclosures over the next year from record low levels, but there will not be a huge wave of distressed sales as happened following the housing bubble. The distressed sales during the housing bust led to cascading price declines, and that will not happen this time. So really, really important to have this context to understand, why this is different, and that, we're not headed for a crash. The data just doesn't support that. So what do we do in this scenario? How do we help our clients? Well, what the most important thing we can do, and we say this often, is we must control the narrative. Stepping up in this space, sharing what is factually true and bringing context and clarity, bringing the insight to our clients so they don't have the fear and the uncertainty that puts their plans on hold. It's being that educated agent, that market expert who can communicate what these headlines really mean and help our clients understand that they don't necessarily have to put their plans on hold because they're scared. Because there's a lot of confusion out there, and the more we can bring the facts, the data, the insights, and control that narrative and tell that story of what's truly happening, the more successful our clients will be. Because at the end of the day, someone in your market is going to step into this space, is going to tell the story, and the question is, will it be you who can lead through this, who can confidently guide your clients as the educated expert to make sure they understand what's truly happening, what those confusing headlines mean, and how to sort through that to make the most powerful and confident decisions. So I hope you enjoyed our monthly market report this month. Always a pleasure to be here with you. We can't wait to be back here with you next month, and we hope you found this information helpful.